Okay, I'm going to do a few here from the homework. See, this is the first one on the homework that only has a horizontal shift. I'll do this one. It has a vertical and a horizontal shift. So we start by identifying the amplitude. So the amplitude is 3 because the distance between the maximum and the minimum is 6, and the amplitude is half of that distance. So the amplitude is 3. Period would be the distance between a cycle of the graph. So if we're going from 4 to 12, that means that my period is 8. So my period is 8, which implies that the b value that I'll need for my equation is 2 pi over the period. That would simplify to pi over 4. Shifts. So the horizontal shift would be the distance of the dot from the y-axis every time. Horizontal shift is how far the dot is from the y-axis. So this is a horizontal shift to the right 2. The vertical shift is not the distance to the dot from the x-axis, but rather it's the distance from the x-axis to the midline, which in this case happens to be equivalent to the distance to the dot. But in general, it's from the x-axis to the midline. So in this case, it's 2. So my shift is to the right 2, and it's down 2. So the next thing I need to do is I look at my reference point to start. And if I go forward for my reference point, a complete cycle, I can see that this is a sine graph. However, instead of going up, it's going down, which means my a value is negative. So therefore, my equation would be y equals negative 3 sine. My b value I determined was pi over 4. My horizontal shift was 2 units to the right, and my vertical shift was 2 units down. So this is the only equation in the universe for this curve that starts at that reference point right there. Let's go down. Let's see if I can find a cosine graph. Okay, here's a cosine graph. All right. So start with the amplitude. So the amplitude is from 3 to negative 3. So that's a total distance of 6, which means in this case my amplitude again is 3. The period would be the distance from minimum to minimum. So from 1 to 5, that's a period of 4. The period of 4 will imply that the b value is 2 pi over the period. That will reduce to be a b value of pi over 2. My shifts, as I said previously, the distance from the y-axis to your reference is your horizontal shift. So in this case, I'm shifted right 3. Now the vertical shift corresponds to the distance that the midline is from the x-axis. So my midline is on the x-axis, which means I do not have a vertical shift. So there's only a horizontal shift. So last thing to look at is the trend of the graph. So if I start here, that is a cosine, and since it goes down, the a value is a positive because cosine always goes down in its natural state. So therefore the equation is y equals 3 cosine. The b value was pi over 2. My horizontal shift was 3 units to the right, and there was no vertical shift. So that's my equation. Let's do one more. Let's see. New. Let's do this one. All right. Distance between max and min is 2. So my amplitude is 1. Period. 2 pi. Shift horizontally to the right, pi over 2. Vertically, draw the midline. Distance from the x-axis to the midline is 3. So it's down 3. I need to get the value of b. b equals 2 pi divided by 2 pi. So that simplifies to be 1. And then the trend of the graph is a sine curve, so it's a positive a value. So y equals sine 1 for the b value. Don't really need that. X minus pi over 2. Subtract 3. All right, that ought to do it.